Okay, welcome back to Cooking with Pear. Today I'm making you could call it a galette, you could call it a pie, freeform pie, you could call it a tart. It was just a creation that we came up with because the pears are in season right now. We had some Brie in the refrigerator. We had a little jar of some fig preserves, and we always have some pecans in the house. And I had some leftover pie dough that I kept in the freezer from Thanksgiving. And we just said, let's whip something up to have a little snack. And it turned into this thing. And since we posted it, a wonderful friend of our youngest daughter, Tara, said, I want the recipe. So I said, okay, Tara, instead of just supplying you with the recipe, I'll make you a quick video. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to make this little freeform pie, galette, tart, whatever you want to call it, that will be topped with pears, brie, pecans, and some fig preserves. Okay, I'm going to start by just cutting up the pears. Now you notice the pears, these have taken a bit of a beating. We bought a bag of these, and I don't know who throws the bags down on the ground before you buy them, but they did take a bit of a beating. They're nice and ripe right now. You can do this with pears that are not terribly ripe. You just bake them a little bit longer, and they do get soft, and they do get sweeter as you bake them. So don't worry if you don't have a particularly ripe pear. And if you do have one like this that's got some lumps and bumps, you just cut those off. I'm going to get the pear ready for the pie. I'm also going to remove the little bit of a woody stem there and the seeds. Now for this recipe, you could buy a pie crust in the grocery store. You could make a pie crust from scratch. You could buy puff pastry in the store, or you could make rough puff from scratch, or these are little puff pastry shells that you might want to try. And these are really easy to use. And the cool thing about these is these are very elegant. If you wanted to have a showy dessert for a dinner, these would work well for that. Okay, the pear, once it's sliced, will start to brown if you don't do something about it. So what I'm going to do is squeeze some lemon juice over this. But one of my secret weapons that you buy once, and it's about a lifetime supply if you just buy a few ounces of it, is pure vitamin C, ascorbic acid in powder form. You can buy that bulk online. And this little bag here I've had for years, and I don't know that I'll ever have to buy it again because it just takes very, very little of this to work. And it's a perfect way of preserving the color of fruits and vegetables, things like potatoes, or in this case, the pears. So I'm just going to put a little water in that bowl with the vitamin C crystals. And that has very little flavor. It is an acid, and you will detect acid, but this is a very sweet fruit, so the fruit and the acid actually go very nicely together. Lemon juice would serve the same purpose, and it would add that lemon flavor if that's what you're looking for. And we like that. That's an option. You got a lot of optionality with this. You could use different fruit. For example, this would be delicious with apples. And instead of brie, you might use cheddar. If you don't like brie, or if you do like blue cheese, you might use something like a Stilton. I know some people really turn their nose up at Stilton. I happen to like it. With pears, it's fantastic. You don't have to use fig preserves. There's all kinds of cool preserves out there. I've got one in the refrigerator that's a peach bourbon preserve that, with the right fruit and the right cheese, would be awfully good too. So let yourself get creative with this. Don't be confined to any particular combination of things. Use whatever you have on hand and have some fun. We do have most wonderful pecans in this part of the world, and I'm going to take some of these. I'm just going to toast them up with a little bit of butter. And The other optional thing here would be to throw some spices in with the butter, or even some brown sugar with spices and praline them a bit. Lots of optionality. These pecans actually are so good that just a little bit of toasting with the butter will bring the flavor up, and they'll play a nice complementary role to the cheese and the pear. So I'm just going to let those toast a little bit while I roll out the pie crust. As I said, this is a pie crust that I made, actually I made it on Thanksgiving, and I had so much pie crust left over that I froze several of them, and we have them ready to go. So I'm going to just pull out one of those and roll it out right now. So this is the thawed pie dough that I made. It's made with Irish butter and really, really good stuff. And it's a real short crust. I obsessed about keeping everything cold. One pro tip, by the way, I didn't invent this. This was from Paul Hollywood, is to put your flour in the freezer, get it really cold, get your butter in the freezer, and then grate your butter with a big box grater. And that way everything stays cold and you don't end up with the butter melting into the flour. So this is very cold. It's very firm right now. And I'm just going to roll it out a bit. Sure this is not sticking. One handy tool to have is a pastry scraper. It is sticking a bit. I neglected to rotate that and make sure that the flour was not adhering. I mean, it had a coating of flour. Okay, a little more flour. All right, we're back in business. And the good news about this is a very informal kind of pie. We're just making it to be a kind of a rustic thing. So don't need to strive for any kind of perfect look on this. If you want to do something, very fancy French style, then you might want to worry about that stuff more. But this is a very basic home pie. Okay, so that's rolled out enough. And the next thing to do is transfer it to the baking sheet so we can begin to put the goodies on it. Okay, so I've transferred the pie crust over to a sheet pan that I've lined with the non-stick foil, the Reynolds Release non-stick, and that has also been sprayed with the pan that has the flour in it that's intended for preparing things like pie tins and cake tins. So that should help it to not stick. Again, this is a very free-form thing. All of the ingredients, except for the crust, are basically cooked. The pear, if it was a little bit less ripe, would benefit from a fairly long time in the oven, about 20 minutes in the oven. But given how thinly I've rolled this crust out, and the fact that the other ingredients are going to come together very quickly, This will probably take about 15 minutes in the oven. I'm just going to watch it and look at the color of the crust until it gets to be the right consistency. I've taken the rind off of the Brie. It's kind of a shame. Normally when I'm eating Brie, I leave the rind on. And by the way, please never eat Brie until it's come up to room temperature. Right out of the refrigerator, Brie just kind of tastes like wax. But boy, when it is allowed time to come up to temperature, it is so creamy and delicious. So I've taken the rind off. I've cut the Brie into strips. The reason for taking the rind off is that I noticed on the first one that I did, when the Brie melted and just left the rind behind, it looked untidy. And if you want this to be pretty, you might want to take the rind off. Feel free to leave it on too if that's your preference. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is get these pears dried off. So they've had the vitamin C, and now they really need to be not transferring a bunch of moisture to the pie crust. So I'm just going to dump them into one of my little convenient towels. And I did do a second pear, like lots of pear on this. Okay, I'll towel those off just a little bit, rid of the excess moisture. And then I like to arrange them in a pinwheel, but again, this is yours to do any way you like. Have fun with it. And the crust itself is kind of a ragged shape, so this is not going to be perfectly geometric. There are a few more in there. And then I'm going to put some of this fig preserves over top of the pears.
You should have put that on our grocery list.
Yeah.
I hate to be without those.
Yep.
Now that I'm addicted to them.
Okay, now the Brie. Oop. Should have started over a little bit farther to the left on this pastry, but oh well. And then the pecans. I'm just going to bring the edges up a little bit. Again, this is very rustic. Somebody might even say crude. I would not be offended. Okay. Oh, those are good. With that butter. Butter pecan. What could not be good about that? Okay, so we had a couple of learning experiences here. One is I piled in way too much fruit. Should have blind baked the crust for about 5 minutes to start out with. It ended up taking almost a half hour before this was done. Another thing I would do is, as I say, use a little less fruit and probably hold the pecans back until the pie has been in baking for about 15 minutes and then put them on top. They didn't get overly brown. They look like they turned out great anyhow. The crust that I made was a very, very short, very tender crust, so it was not easy to get out of the pan. That sheet of aluminum foil was actually very helpful. You could use it like a hammock to transport it, and it did not stick. And I've already cheated and tasted a little bit of this. The flavor is fantastic. It may not look perfect, but it tastes. Oh, the crust just melts in your mouth. The pear is very, very soft, but very sweet. I think it's been brightened up a little bit by the vitamin C and lemon juice. The brie is creamy and rich. And those pecans toasted in a little bit of butter. Man, doesn't get much better. Really, really good. Encourage you to give it a try. Have fun with it. Mix it up any way you like. Try the puff pastry. Try regular pie crust. Buy it already frozen in the store if you want to save yourself a lot of work. Anyhow, have fun.